Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bad Calls, Balls, and Brawls. It's your host, 305 Sports Babe. What can I say? Dolphins, third loss in a row. We started 3-0, lost 3, so we're at 500. But I believe everything's going to turn around because Tua's coming back, Stephen Ross is coming back, Tron Armstead's coming back. It's like a whole new squad coming back. But tonight, let's not talk about the 500 Dolphins. Let's talk about the team that we remember, we love, and who we're going to honor this week. Talk about the 1972 Dolphins. Tonight I have a special guest who you already see in the room, Mr. Ray Lodato. He is the co-author of the book, But We Were 17-0, a book that was dedicated to the 1972 season. So Ray, welcome. Good evening. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for being on the show. So obviously, we're not going to do a repeat of 1972 this year, but tell me, first of all, where were you during that 1972 season? Were you in Miami? What was going on in your life in 1972?
We had just moved from Miami back north. We had lived in the north, moved to Miami for about a year when I was in second grade, and then moved back north. We were in Miami for the Buffalo game.
Okay.
Yeah, which was a nail biter, I'll tell you. Oof.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
The season, and they, came very close to losing that one.
So, so the 1972 season, what were the expectations of the team and the fans going into that year? Did you know that you guys had something special that year, or did you kind of go with it? What was the expectations for the fans and the teams going that year?
Well, I don't excuse me. I don't remember too much what our expectations were as fans. I think we were happy they had made the Super Bowl, but not happy with the results in Super Bowl VI when they lost 24-3. But apparently, from what our interviews with the players, that's exactly how they felt. Shula said to them after they lost, "Remember this feeling. Remember this feeling of how it feels to have lost." And that was the second worst loss in Super Bowl history at that time.
Yeah.
So this feeling, and then when they got to training camp, Zonka told us that Shula said, "I want you to be prepared every week, and we want to, attack every week, and we want to win every week." And Zonka, alone pretty much among the players, took that literally, meaning he expects us to go undefeated. I think the other guys saw it as, do your best effort and, win every week. But Zonka said, no, Shula was telling us to do this. And so, Shula had very high expectations. He was a great coach. He had a great coaching staff. He really put together a team out of spare parts in some ways. The number of guys who were picked up on waivers or who had been cut other places. Kuchenberg was cut by two other teams and was playing semi-pro ball and became, a multi-time All-Pro and Pro Bowl player and should be in the Hall of Fame. So, other players, had come from, the waiver draft or something like that, and they became Hall of Famers or just, Pro Bowlers. So it was really an amazing coaching job.
So, okay, so the coaching job. Now, the prior year, 1971.
Yeah.
Remind us, what was that final record and what were the vibes from that year?
They were 10-3-1.
Okay.
You have to remember that was the second year of the Shula era. So in 69, they were 3-10-1 under Wilson. Wilson got fired. They were 10-4 the next season under Shula, which was a major turnaround. And then they were 10-3-1 the year after. And they seemed to be much better. And they got to the AFC Championship game. And they were playing their bitter rivals, the then Baltimore Colts.
Yeah.
And they were bitter rivalry because the Colts and Shula had a lot of history, and his departure hadn't gone over well in Baltimore. Yeah. And the Dolphins beat them 21-0 in the AFC Championship game. So there was a real feeling that, wow, this is a team that has really improved, and now they're in the Super Bowl, and this is great. But the Super Bowl result wasn't exactly what we were hoping for.
Of course not. So 1972 season starts. One game, 2 games. At what point were the team and the fans kind of like, we have something special? Now, you said Shula believed in it the whole time. Zonka was drinking the Kool-Aid as well. But, for example, the Eagles right now are 5-0, 6-0, 5-0 or 6-0. So they, believe they have something special. But at what point through the 1972 season that you guys said, hold on, like this might really be something good?
I don't know that anybody thought that.
Okay.
Because I think Shula didn't necessarily think they were going to win every game. He wanted them to win every game. Tim Foley told us that they used to come into the locker room after the game, and Shula would say, "Well, we won, but you didn't do this, this, and this." And didn't we win?
Yep. That's Shula like, yep.
Yeah. And so two of the players, Langer and I guess it was Langer and Kuchenberg, said they looked at each other after the 10th game and said, this isn't good. We're jinxing ourselves. If we're 14-0 and we lose in the first round of the playoffs, this is bad. We have to think about which of these games we might want. Not that they were going to tank, but if they had to lose a game, it would be okay.
To get the jitters out, to kind of just like, okay, like, and they never ended up not doing it.
Right, exactly. They just kept, and they look at the game, they go, well, we're going to win the next one. Well, we'll win the one after that. And then, it just became one of those things where they gave their best effort every week, and it was enough.
Definitely. Now, who in regular season do you believe was the toughest competitor back then that the Dolphins faced in the 72 season?
Well, it's hard to argue against the Bills because they took to 1 point in Miami, but they weren't a good team. They very good day, but they weren't a great team. Let's see. I don't know. I guess Minnesota was also a close game, and Minnesota was a really good team at that time. So the Dolphins won in the last quarter. So that was certainly the team that gave them the hardest run and was the best. There's a lot of Hall of Famers on that Minnesota team.
Definitely. Do you think the Dolphins won in spite of Don Shula being the coach or because of Don Shula being the coach?
Absolutely because of.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a genius. And the thing I think it doesn't get recognized about Shula is that a lot of coaches get really stuck, especially if they've had success and they coach the same way no matter what. And the game changed in the late 70s after the Dolphins, had won Super Bowls. Yeah. They loosened the rules to allow more scoring. It became a passing game. Remember, excuse me, the Dolphins were a real running team when they were winning. Greasy threw 7 passes in Super Bowl 8, the whole game. I mean, Tua throws that in a series, So I think that as the game changed, Shula changed too, because, there couldn't be 2 quarterbacks more different than Greasy and Marino, right? And then, he adapted to that and coached Marino successfully for many, many years. So
definitely. So let's talk more about the book. So tell our viewers, what made you and your father decide to do the book? What is the book about? Give us an overview of the book that you and your father
wrote. Sure. So my father was motivated. It was his idea all along. It was my father's idea was to do a book like a book called The Boys of Summer. Okay. I don't know if you read that. That was a book about the Brooklyn Dodgers, and he had been a Dodgers fan growing up, and he knew these players, and he was really fascinated by the book that Roger Kahn did. I think he read it more than once. And he was fascinated by what happened with the players afterwards. That, they weren't just, these superstars. They were real people who had struggles and challenges and all that afterwards. And he wanted to see how the players on the Dolphins were doing and also figure out what was the, being a psychologist, which he was. He was one of the pioneers of sports psychology.
Interesting.
Yeah. He wanted to find out what it was that caused them to be able to do this, to have the undefeated season. And so he kept asking them, what are the factors that were most important? And got a lot of different answers from the players. So we set out to do all of the starters because, 50 some odd guys on a team. I don't think it was 53 then, but it was a lot. And that was a lot. We didn't have a advance or anything like that. We were financing it all, himself. So we decided just to do the 22 starters, and we got everybody except Jake Scott and Marlon Briscoe. Okay. They worked really hard. And Jake liked his privacy, and no one would break that for us. No one would say, here's his phone number. And this is pre-internet. Here's his phone number. Here's his address. Go find him. People would go, well, he doesn't want to be found. So, And Briscoe was having trouble at the time, so that was also kind of off limits, but from the players. But and we didn't have the benefit of the internet, so we got everybody but those two, and we did pretty well.
So I want to hit a little more on that. So when you said, you reached out to these players, so you weren't necessarily like a sport journalist. You were kind of doing your own freelance stuff. So obviously Twitter wasn't back there where you could just like at Tua, at Mike Gesicki. So back in the day, with all due respect, how were you really reaching out to these players? Were you waiting after the game? Were you calling? Were you showing up their house? How were you making contact with these players without the credentials of let's say CBS or something?
Well, I should mention that when we moved down to Florida in '69, my father started hanging out at the Dolphins training camp, and he got to know Larry Little very well. And Larry provided some introductions to players, and we followed the players even after we moved back north. We followed the team. We were at every Miami game from 1970 to 1981.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
Some of those were really, really cold events, and we'll talk about that some other time. We went to Baltimore, we went to Buffalo, so they saw us, and we were kind of part of the traveling entourage for a while there. So it was easy to have that entree, and if the players needed validation, they could call Larry, they could call Tim Foley, and they could say, vouch for us.
So they knew that you guys were legit, that you weren't just, kind of groupies following around. They knew.
And they knew we weren't going to do a slam job. So, that was also true.
Or twist the words.
Right.
So what were you asking these players after the game? So I know your father said psychiatrist, so he was asking more like the logistics of like probably, what's going on in the mindset. But what information were you trying to get out of these players that really created the book and the content?
We were trying to find out how they had been able to put this together. Everybody tries, right? Everybody tries to win. Nobody goes out there going, this is one we can throw away. Everybody tries to win every game, and they were able to do it. And as the season went on, the pressure got to be more. And they just stuck with it. So we really wanted to get at that factor. And then we also wanted to talk about their relationships with each other. That was his other interest was, how they got along as individuals. They said they were a very kind of business-like group. They weren't like guys hanging out and going out for beers. I mean, they did sometimes, but they weren't big partiers. They kind of saw this as a business. Sorry.
No, you're good. No, very interesting. So on a personal note, that 1972 season, favorite player, one that you said, you know what, like that's my guy, most personable one. Who was your guy and who was your dad's guy?
Well, we were longtime friends of Larry Little and Tim Foley, so those were our guys. We were, we're very, very good contact with them. When my dad died last year, I called Larry and let him know, and he was very gracious about it. And I had a note from Tim's daughter as well to let him know as well. So those were the two guys we were probably closest to.
Definitely. Now, with the book, what was if your dad had to say the purpose of the book? Was it more of a keepsake between you guys? Was it to preserve the future? What was really the goal of that book?
I think, like I said, he wanted to do something in football that had been done in baseball with the Boys of Summer. He wanted to follow up and see how things were different, because sports was different by that time. The guys who played in the 50s or 40s when my father was following the Dodgers, went to work right away, right afterwards. They didn't make a lot of money. These guys had made quite a bit of money, and they had opportunities for endorsements. They had opportunities to be in business. So he wanted to see how they had worked it out. And some of the guys really moved away from football. Some of the Dolphins, they decided that was not part of their life anymore. I went to see Jim Langer in Minnesota. He was a vice president of a bank at the time. No memorabilia anywhere. Didn't really touch necessarily with people. Not out of any hostility. Just that was part of his life that was over. So
that's what I was going to ask you. Was it like something beyond the locker room that we didn't know? Because it's not necessarily what we see. We see it as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, sports team in history, and it's something that they should be proud about. Why did some of them just want to kind of like shut that chapter of their lives and forget about it?
I don't really know. I think they felt like they had to put it in its place. They had to say it was over, or else they would just be kind of wallowing in nostalgia forever. But it really wasn't about, I don't get along with this guy and I never want to see him again. It was, they had fond memories. They respected each other a lot. It was great. The one negative note, I was rereading the book, was Kuchenberg was really angry at Gary Yepremian for the pass in the Super Bowl. I mean, really angry at him. Those quotes are amazing. So.
Oh my goodness. In your book, did you ever have to edit anything out, or you kind of left it raw at how it is?
We pretty much left it raw. We did our own transcription. So I think we got to be very possessive of the quotes. Once we spend all that time playing the tape back, and, there was no software for that at the time. Once you have a long quote, you're very protective of it,
Definitely. Now, after the 1972 season, we all know, how that ended and stuff. Going into the 1973 season, did you and your father decide, hey, maybe let's continue this journey, or was it like a 1 year thing? What was your plan after the Super Bowl in 1972-73?
Well, we didn't do the book until the 80s, so it was a long time later. The most interesting thing about the 73 season, which obviously we weren't doing the book then, was players unanimously in the book said the 73 team, which was 12-2, was better than the 72 team.
Really?
Everybody said the same thing.
Wow.
It was clear it wasn't group speak, but they all felt that. They all felt that the team was much better, that people were gunning for them, and they still were able to take people out. And they felt the Raiders got lucky in that second game, where they, Stabler throws the passes, he's getting sacked, and, Clarence Davis catches it with 3 guys on him. Come on. They definitely felt that team was better. And the way they took the Vikings out in the Super Bowl, it wasn't really even a game. I mean, the Vikings were, steamrolled. Sorry.
That was it. Now, let's talk about the current day Miami Dolphins.
Okay.
Similar you see with that 1972 season that you see with the current Dolphins, and what big differences? Obviously, there's many differences, but what similarities do you see with the present day Miami Dolphins and the 1972 Dolphins?
I think that they've got a good coach. They've got a young coach. Of course, Shula was a veteran coach by the time he came to the Dolphins. They've got a young coach who seems to understand the team, and I think that's really good. He's following the team as opposed to necessarily molding him to himself. Yeah. So that's the difference from Shula. I think they're very dedicated to winning. I think there's less tolerance for player development these days than there was then. Greasy was drafted in 67, and the 72 season he was a fifth-year player, and people are already giving Tua grief, in his third year, one of which he barely played.
Yeah.
So that's a difference. But Tua is obviously a much different quarterback than Greasy. I mean, he's got a tremendous arm. He's got the ability to run. The game's different. There's not the backfield is not on any team is not as good as the Dolphin backfield was in the 70s. So that's certainly a difference.
And I'm sure the offensive line was stronger in the 70s than now.
It was an amazing offensive line because not only were they cast-offs, almost all of them were cast-offs from other teams, but the offensive line coach was a rookie coach, Monty Clark. He had just left the league, and he was hired by Shula to be the offensive line coach. So he could relate to the players, but he also had a really good system. And they, the NFL Hall of Fame has this crazy thing where they usually only choose 2 guys from an offensive line for the Hall of Fame. And then, so the Dolphins have 2. They have Larry Little and they have Jim Langer. They could have all 5. They were that good. Wayne Moore, Norm Evans at the tackles, and of course Kuchenberg at the other guard. They could have all made it.
I sure could have some of them now. And our offensive line really seems to be struggling. And I mean, I'm a big fan of Teron Armstead, and he obviously being a veteran, we really need him to block for Tua, because at this point, Tua is very, very cool, and the offensive line needs to hold as much as possible. So I really wish we could take that 70s, offensive line. I feel like Tua would be in better shape with a strong line, not even just in the 70s, any better offensive line,
Yeah, and they said they adjusted too. Greasy got hurt in the 5th game, and Earl Morrall came in for the next 9 games. They said they adjusted that Greasy, had a certain way about him, and he was a mobile quarterback and a lot of yardage. Morrall was much older; he was not as mobile. So they knew when Greasy went down, that Larry Little said they knew they had to step up. They knew they had to play differently. They had to protect Morrall differently because the spring quarterback was a rookie, so that was the problem. But they really knew that Morrall had experience and he was good to work with, but at the same time, he was different. He was going to be different than Greasy.
Talking about Greasy, what current day quarterback would you say is the most similar to Bob Greasy's style and talent, if you had to say any current day quarterback?
Oh, that's a good question.
Ask him.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, because there's this idea now, there's memories are short. There's idea now that quarterbacks are newly mobile, But in the 70s, there were a lot of mobile quarterbacks. Bobby Douglas of the Bears had 900 yards rushing one year as a quarterback.
Wow.
And so Greasy was a very mobile quarterback. He wasn't certainly as fast as a lot of the quarterbacks who can move out of the pocket today, but he ran a lot. He could move a lot. So I'm trying to think of who today he's most similar to.
Mahomes is not scared to run. We know Josh Allen's not. We do have those quarterbacks that, Oh, I lost you. Let's see if he comes back in. Just lost Ray for a second. Let's hopefully he comes back in. For those who just joined, we have Ray Lodato. He is the author of "But We Were 17-0," the story about the 1972 Dolphins that him and his father wrote. The whole book is based around the 1972 season and the different players that they interviewed to really keep state that season, and more of a psychological thing with them too as well. Like, hey, what's helping you guys with the 72 season and kind of tracking that journey. So definitely reach out to Ray, get a copy of his book. As you guys know, this is our 1972 or 50th anniversary, so it is the perfect time to get the book if you can. Definitely keepscape for everyone. So we just lost Ray, but let's see if we can get him back in the show. If not, I don't want to bore you guys talking about the Miami Heat. My goodness. Terrible last night, but let's give it a sec to see if we can get Ray back in the show. All right, let's see. Let me see if I can get him back in. Nothing yet, so. All right. So so let's give it another few minutes to see if Ray's able to come back on the show. But this week, Dolphins, Pittsburgh Steelers, Sunday Night Football, our good buddy, not really good buddy, I don't know how to describe him at this point, Coach Flo, back in the house. How do we feel, right? It's also Stephen Ross's first game coming back after suspension. Tron Armstead's coming back. Tua is our starting quarterback. That is very true. Sunday night is going to be electric. We are on a 3-game losing streak, and definitely we need to turn this around. We're still okay, right? Things are still fine. So hopefully Sunday Night Football, Dolphins, Steelers, we got to get this, right? No more excuses. Our defense looked pretty good last Sunday against the Vikings. Talking about the Vikings, hey, shout out to their fans. Really, really, really class act fans. They filled up the stadium, right? We know the Bills came, Bills Mafia takeover, but the Vikings fans were excellent. Hey, they won fair and square. Shout out to them for just a really, really classy fan base. But this week, Steelers fans, I don't want to see any terrible towels. It is our house. We're winning on prime time. So we'll see. And Miami Heat opened up last night home against the Chicago Bulls. If you ask me, it was a whole bunch of bull. I don't know, guys, right? I have really, really high expectations for this team. We came so close last year. Came down to a Game 7 finals against the Boston Celtics, and we just couldn't finish it. And just last night, there's a lot of things that I didn't like. Bam Adebayo was not aggressive in the paint, not cool. Kyle Lowry, what are you doing? I'll tell you, Max Strus and Tyler Hero had great games, but just so many little things that we just have to get together, because just this week, tomorrow we play the Celtics. Then we have a 2-game series against the Raptors, so it's not going to get easy. Then we have a whole bunch of games on the West Coast. Philly's hot. Celtics are hot. Bucks are not going to be easy. So there is a lot of basketball left to be played. Let's see. I think we have Ray back. Ray, there you are.
Sorry about that. My internet connection is bulky sometimes.
No, Ray, you're good. I was just boring them with a terrible Miami Heat basketball. We looked terrible last night, so I'm sure they're happy you're back in the show.
Okay, great.
Ray, where are you located now?
In Chicago.
Chicago is one of my favorite cities in the whole entire world.
Are you coming up for the game?
I am. I'll be there in 2 weeks. Chicago. Well, as of right now, I'm going. No, I was in Chicago in April. Our local TV station down here, Bally Sports, had a contest. Mm-hmm. One of those things where it's if you retweet something and you never think you're going to win. And I've never won anything in my life. I retweeted this thing. Long story short, I won a 4-day, 3-night, expenses paid. They put me in the Omni Hotel downtown, which was, I mean, I felt royalty there. Southwest Airlines, 2 tickets to United Center. Your city, New York will always be my number one because that's obviously where I'm from. My first time in Chicago was a few months ago. I'm in love with your city. I mean, everything, the people, the culture, the food. I can't wait till I go back.
Well, we'll have to show you guys a good time when you come.
I can't. I mean, the pizza alone, and then what's the Drunken Goat, the bar down below?
Billy Goat.
Billy Goat, fantastic.
Yeah.
And then the athletic club. Did we go to?
Did you go to the East Bay Club?
There, it's like almost like a haunted hotel with like a rooftop bar overlooking Millennium Park.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't know.
Yeah. So we are projected to go up there for the Bulls games. Tickets, oh my goodness. So for the Ravens game, we paid a lot. The tickets right now for the Dolphins Bears game, like $400 lower level.
Ooh, wow.
Crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Yeah.
Now, how's the weather up there? Scare me now.
It's in the 30s right now. It's supposed to be in the 70s this weekend, but it won't last. So.
Oh my! So it's actually 60 degrees here. It's really, really chilly for Miami.
Whatever layers you have, bring them in November.
So we learned the lesson. We went there in April. I thought like April sunny, and I had like all my cute skirts and everything. It snowed when we landed there.
Yeah,
it was. And your cold up there is like a different type of cold.
It is. It really is. It's totally different than New York cold.
Oh my goodness. But no, I'm super excited to go back to Chicago. We usually go to 2 away games a year. We went to Baltimore, which was amazing. I have to say, like, we almost just did MetLife instead of Baltimore. Even though I don't like the city of Baltimore, that game was one for the ages.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Chicago, no, I'm thrilled to go back to your city. Everything about it, the pizza, Luminalti's. Luminalti follows me on Twitter. We have a Twitter romance. They are excited for me to come up. They do. I'm like, coming to Chicago, and they're like, Heart, we can't wait to see you. I'm like, can't wait to see you.
That's great.
But no, super excited. But no, don't let me hold you any longer. Last question I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
Favorite memory of that 1972 season?
Oh, it wasn't in person, but, being at home and watching the last minutes of the Super Bowl because, that was it. They win, they're champions, they're undefeated. And then, it got to be a little bit scary there for a minute. So that even heightened the experience more, but it was just so great.
Definitely.
I had bets going with my classmates in elementary school, and I won $1.35. So.
Oh my heavens! No, that's a big deal.
We kept it low. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And it's really sad that a lot of they are, as you know, and so we're some of the viewers for this Sunday night game, Sunday night football. Before the game, they're doing a beautiful ceremony for the 1972 season team, but a lot of the men have passed on, so it's only a handful left, which is sad.
Yeah, and the way a lot of them went is sad too because there was a lot of CTE there.
Oh. And that's, becoming more and more light. And back in the day, it was kind of like a hush-hush thing. But now, with more medical technology and stuff, and we're realizing that, like, there's a lot more to this game than meets the eye and its long-term effects. So,
well, I have to say, if anybody, finds the book, I don't have extra copies myself, but if anybody finds the book, most of the players had a lot of memories at that time of the season. So that, whoever suffered from it later, it hadn't kicked in yet.
So I was going to ask you as I wrap up, where can people get a copy of the book? We don't know.
I think Amazon. Okay. The publisher's out of business, so it's not, you can't just go to theirs. I'd love to get it printed. That would be great.
I know a lot of Dolphins fans would love to read it. So if there's anything we could do on our end to, help publish that or get the word out, I mean, it would, especially this year. And the younger generation Dolphins, millennials and below, I mean, we have no recollection of that season. And we hear about it, but to read it firsthand from you and your father and the players would be a gift.
Well, let me tell you, last year I was teaching a class and I was hanging out outside the room waiting for the other professor to end. And one of my students had a Dolphin sweatshirt on. And I said to him, "Oh, that's, you're a Dolphin fan." And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I wrote a book about them." And just kind of a throwaway. And my father had died around that time. So, I'm thinking a lot about him. And at the end of the class in December, this student came up to me with a copy of the book. They had bought it online and asked me to sell it. And then another friend of his in the class did the same thing. So I signed 2 books at the end of class last year.
Oh, look at you, rock star. And Ray, tell everybody, what do you do now? What do you do up in Chicago?
I'm sorry. I teach at the University of Chicago.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good school.
Yeah, it is. Been known to be.
Yeah. And what do you teach over there?
Well, I'm a political scientist, but I teach in environmental and urban studies.
Okay, very, very nice. Perfect. And Ray, where can friends of the show find you, stay in contact with you, ask you questions? What's the best way to stay in contact with you?
I'm on Twitter, as you know. I'm at Ray Lodato on Twitter. So just look for me there. That's probably the best way.
Perfect. Well, Ray, I appreciate you coming on the show tonight. You definitely provided a lot of insight for the 1972 season. Made me more jealous that I was not around during that 72 season, but I really, really hope one day to read the book and view the team from the eyes and the heart of you, your father, and the team as a whole, and feel that what you guys felt that year. So right. I appreciate all your insight, and I definitely hope one day to get a copy of it, or at least read it.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, thanks, Ashley, and I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you in Chicago.
See you in 2 weeks, hopefully. Fins up. Perfect. All right, guys. So, yes, 1972 season, as you know, was very, very special in Dolphin history. And for those who were a part of it, you know, definitely keep the memory going and share what you felt and saw that year, because I don't know if we're ever going to see anybody ever do it again. Hopefully the Eagles don't do it. I'm not ready to see that fruit being broken this year. But anyways, as you guys know, it was said before, this Sunday, Dolphins versus Steelers, Sunday Night Football, home at the Hard Rock. Tua comes back. Brian Flores is kind of back. Stephen Ross is back. Teron Armstead's back. It's a lot of backness coming. So definitely looking forward to that game. And just Miami Heat, rough start last night, but I'm not worried. You know, the one who I'm kind of worried about is Victor Oladipo. Victor Oladipo is injured again. I don't know if it was like a summer injury that they just hush-hushed about, but it just seems like this man can't stay healthy or even just get healthy. So it's at the point where it's like, get it together or get off the pot, because there's a lot of men hungry for his spot, and we have a lot of potential, and we really got to see this roll out. So anyways, it's been fantastic tonight. Please go ahead and follow Ray. Awesome insight on 1972 season, but just an all-around great guy. So definitely give Ray the follow. Thank you so much for being on the show tonight. And until then, fins up. Let's go Heat. And watch some postseason baseball. Bye, guys. Good night.